Hello, my friends. Welcome back to English Unleashed. I'm Tom. Today, I'm going to talk about one of the most important ideas in language learning. I'm going to talk about input. What is input? Why is it so important? And what kinds of input can help you improve your English in a real, natural way? This is a very important topic because many learners spend a lot of time thinking about grammar rules, memorizing word lists, or worrying about speaking perfectly. But they do not spend enough time getting the right kind of English into their minds. And that is where input comes in. So let us begin with a very simple question. What is input? In language learning, input means the English you hear or read. It is the language that comes into your mind from the outside. So when you listen to a podcast, that is input. When you watch a YouTube video in English, that is input. When you read a story, an article, or a short dialogue, that is input too. So the input is not the English you produce, it is the English you say or write. It is the English you receive. Input is the English you take in. For example, if you hear this sentence, I'm a little tired today, so I want to stay home. That sentence is input. Your brain receives it. Your brain starts to notice the words, the order, the meaning, and the feeling of the sentence. And when you hear many sentences like this again and again, your English starts to grow naturally. This is one of the biggest secrets in language learning. You do not learn English only by studying English. You learn English by meeting English again and again in meaningful situations. Now, maybe you are thinking, Tom, does that mean I should just listen and read all day? Well, not exactly. The important thing is not only to get input, the important thing is to get the right kind of input. Yes, the right kind of input. The best kind of input is input that you can understand, or input that you can mostly understand. This is often called comprehensible input. Comprehensible means easy to understand. That means English that is not too easy and not too difficult. It is the English that challenges you a little bit, not too much, but still gives you meaning. For example, imagine you hear this sentence. Sarah opened the window because the room was too hot. Even if you do not know every single word, you may still understand the general meaning. You can imagine the room, you can imagine that it is hot, you can understand that Sarah opened the window. That is good input. Your brain can work with that. But now imagine this sentence. The government's economic policy triggered widespread dissatisfaction amongst industrial stakeholders. For many A2 or B1 learners, this sentence is too difficult. There are too many unknown words. The meaning is not clear. The brain cannot relax and understand the message. So, this kind of input may not be very useful for your level, or at least not yet. This is why level matters. If the input is too hard, you feel lost. If it is too easy, you do not grow much. But if it is just a little above your current level, your brain learns very well. Now let's think about children for a moment. How do children learn their first language? They do not begin with grammar books. They do not start by learning verb tables. They do not memorize the names of tenses. Instead, they hear language every day. They hear simple words first, then simple sentences, then longer sentences, then stories, conversations, and questions. A child hears things like, "Come here," "Sit down," "Do you want some water?" "Look at the dog," "Where is your shoe?" The child hears these messages again and again in real situations. Slowly, the child connects sounds with meaning. Then patterns begin to grow in the mind. This is why input is so powerful. It helps the brain build the language naturally. Now, of course, adult learners are different from children in many ways. Adults can study grammar. Adults can think about rules. Adults can compare languages. That helps a lot. But even for adults, input is still essential. It is important. Without enough good input, English stays unnatural. It stays like information in a notebook, not a living language in your mind. Let me give you an example. Maybe you study the phrase, "How's it going?" You read the meaning in your book. It means, "How are you?" or "How are things?" That is useful. But now imagine something better. Imagine that you hear this phrase in many different situations. A friend says, "Hey, how's it going?" A man in a shop says, "Hi, how's it going?" A woman on a podcast says, "So, how's it going with your job?" A character in a series says, "How's it going, guys?" Now the phrase becomes real. You do not only know the meaning, you start to feel the tone, the rhythm, the natural situations, and the small changes in use. That is what input does. It gives life to the language. Input also helps you learn vocabulary in context. This is very important. Many learners try to memorize isolated words. For example, hungry means needing food. Borrow means take something and return it later. Quiet means not loud. Well, that is okay, but it is only the beginning. Real learning becomes stronger when you see and hear these words inside meaningful sentences. For example, "I skipped lunch, so now I'm hungry." "Can I borrow your pen for a second?" "Please be quiet. The baby is sleeping." Now you're not just learning words, you are learning how words live inside real, natural English. All right, now let's talk about grammar. A lot of learners think grammar must always come first. They think, first, I study the rule, then maybe later I can understand real English. But very often, the opposite is also true. Sometimes you understand the grammar better after you meet it many times in input. For example, Maybe you hear these sentences many times. I've never seen that movie. She's already finished her homework. We've just arrived. Have you ever tried sushi? You may not understand the name of the tense at first. Maybe later you learn that this is the present perfect. But even before you study the grammar deeply, your brain is already noticing the pattern. You are learning how it sounds. You are connecting it with meaning. So when you finally study the rule, it feels familiar. This is why input makes grammar easier. It prepares the brain. Another very important thing is that input helps with speaking. This is something many learners do not fully understand. Some people think speaking practice alone will make them fluent. Well, speaking is important, yes, but speaking grows from input. If you have little input, then your brain has fewer examples to use when you want to speak. Think of input as food for your English brain. If you do not feed your brain enough real English, your speaking becomes weak, slow, and unnatural. But when you listen and read a lot, your mind begins to collect useful phrases, sentence patterns, and natural expressions. Then one day, in conversation, you do not have to build every sentence from zero. Some language is already there. They are waiting for you. For example, because of input, you may naturally start saying, "That makes sense. I'm not sure about that. It depends. To be honest, I didn't mean that. What happened? That sounds great." These are the kind of expressions that come from meeting real English many times. So, I want you to remember one very simple truth. Input is not extra. Input is not a small side activity. Input is one of the main ways you build English. All right, now let's talk about the kind of input that learners can use, and we are going to talk about how to use them in real life. Because it is not enough to know that input is important. You also need to know where to find it, how to use it, and which kinds of input are best for your level. So let's begin with one very useful type of input, listening input. Listening input means all the English you hear. This can come from podcasts like English Unleashed. It can come from YouTube videos, TV shows, films, audiobooks, lessons. Listening is powerful because language is first a sound. Before you can say English naturally, your ears need to become familiar with English. When you listen a lot, you begin to notice how English really sounds. You notice rhythm, you notice stress, you notice how people connect words, you notice common phrases. And slowly, you stop hearing English as many separate words. You begin to hear it in chunks. For example, a learner may first hear this as many small pieces. What are you doing today? But after hearing it many times, the learner begins to hear it more naturally. What are you doing today? Then later, maybe even faster. What are you doing today? This is one of the reasons listening matters so much. It trains your ear to hear real English, not only textbook English. All right, now let's talk about another very useful kind of input: reading input. Reading input includes short stories, graded readers, articles, dialogues, transcripts, even subtitles. Reading is very useful because it lets you move at your own speed. You can stop, you can think, you can go back, you can read a sentence again. You can look at the structure more carefully. So it is really important. Now, you may ask, how much input do I need? The answer is simple: probably more than you think. The more, the better. Many learners study English for years, but they still do not get enough real input. They study grammar for 20 minutes. They memorize 10 words. They do one exercise, but they do not spend enough time listening and reading natural English. If you want your English to improve, input needs to become part of your daily life. This does not mean you need 5 hours a day. Even 30 to 40 minutes of good input every day can make a big difference over time. The key is regular contact, everyday practice. In the morning, listen to 10 minutes of a clear English podcast. In the afternoon, read a short text or story for 10 minutes. In the evening, watch 10 or 15 minutes of a simple English video. That may not sound like much, but done very well, it becomes very powerful. Good input is usually clear, interesting, level appropriate, and repeated. Clear input is easier to understand. The speaker does not talk too fast. The text is not too difficult. The message is direct and clear. The input should also be interesting. If the input is boring, you will not stay with it. It should also be level appropriate. You should understand enough to follow the message. Repetition is also important. Do not always look for something new. Sometimes the best thing you can do is listen to the same podcast again. Now, before we finish, I want to share one final idea. Do not think of input as something passive. Input is not just sitting there and doing nothing. When you listen carefully, notice words, follow meaning, repeat phrases, and come back to the same material again and again. Your brain is working hard. Real input is active in the deepest way. It is building your English from the inside. So, feed your English mind every day. Give it clear language. Give it natural language. Give it interesting language. And give it time. Thank you so much for listening to English Unleashed. I'm Tom. Until next time, keep listening, keep reading, and keep growing. Bye for now.